first to you, Jim Norekas, let me put it to you that this is the fact of life. This is what American mainstream media has become, ratings-driven, commercially driven. And the issue now is that I want to put to you is whether what they're doing is political spin, and for whom? Is it outright lies? What do you make of it?
Well, I think there's sort of a surreal disconnect between the reporting that you get from the ground in Cairo and the discussion of those events back in Washington, where you have really they're talking about an entirely different situation, whereas you're getting very vivid accounts of the brutality of the government-backed thugs that are attacking the protesters in the square. In Washington, you're hearing people talk about how the Obama administration is trying to get the head of the intelligence service, in other words, the boss of the people who are throwing Molotov cocktails at the pro-democracy activists.
And what do you think that means
to be the new ruler of Egypt?
The role that media plays in American society?
Well, I think that in any country, in any society, the media are an important institution for maintaining the stability of the people who are in power, and the United States is no exception to that. We have a media that is very commercialized, very corporate. There's only a very marginal public sector in U.S. media, and so you have in the United States a media that is very closely aligned with the corporate establishment, which in turn has a very close tie with government.
Let me turn to Charlie Wolfe at this point, who's lived in London for, what, more than 20 years. If I may describe you as a conservative with a small c at least. Charlie Wolfe, can you tell me, what do you make of the American media at this time? Many more channels are available to you possibly in London than there are in the States. Do you believe that everything that Fox or CNN or MSNBC says is true?
Well, first to the charge in the opening about superficiality. Any foreign coverage is going to be superficial. As an American sitting here, as well as the BBC knows America or Sky News here in London, I will look at it and find it superficial. You just don't understand it. And I'm sure any Egyptian sitting in America watching Fox or CNN will make the same charge. I don't buy into this bit about the corporate media and your last guest, most of his arguments. I think obviously you're going to find CNN, MSNBC are going to take a more liberal line. Fox is going to take a more conservative line. From what I've seen watching Fox, and again having the ability to see the BBC foreign coverage and to watch Al Jazeera and Press and some of the others, I haven't found anything that I would consider to be spin or lies, etc. There is obviously a worry about the Muslim Brotherhood, but again, to dispute the charge made earlier, I don't think that Americans are looking at Arab protesters and not being able to relate to them. I know we'll get more into the politics later, but at least from a conservative angle, the whole Bush freedom agenda was that freedom is universal. He said it over and over again about Iraq and Afghanistan and Egypt as well. Let me
pick on a specific point that was in our opening sequence with Professor Ali Ben-Wazizi. You're Iranian. We heard in that little clip there at the beginning one American commentator saying this was not like the Iranian Revolution, that the Muslim Brotherhood did not aim to make this uprising lead to an Islamist government. With your expertise, what do you make of these various arguments?
Yes, the debate in Iran, as well as in the United States, of course, has focused on the similarities and differences between this movement and what happened back in 1979. There are clearly similarities, but I would think that a closer comparison could be made to the events in Iran in 2009. I believe what is happening in Egypt, which is extraordinarily important for the region and for the Arab world, is a movement that is not ideologically based. It's a movement that is demanding citizens' rights, democratic rights, and this could have profound implications. You're quite right that initially, or your first guest was quite right, that initially the attention was focused on the implications of what is going on for U.S. foreign policy, particularly in relation to the Arab-Israeli conflict and the potential gains that the Ikhwan, the Islamist groups, would make. But I believe that that has changed in the past few days. And I also feel that the administration has taken what has been going on the streets quite seriously. And President Obama has spoken specifically about the behavior of the goon squads of the Interior Ministry, that's unacceptable. So I think the media itself has gone through some transformation in its coverage. And what we hear and see now is a relatively fair reflection of what is happening on the ground.
All right, Jim Norekas in New York, given that context, does it even matter what the American public sees on the media? Do they even care? I was interested to see some research by the Pew Research Center that was saying that despite the fact that 20% of foreign coverage in the networks actually went to covering the demonstrations in Egypt, very much fewer viewers, something like 11%, said that they were watching it closely.
Well, I think there is an effort made on the part of the pundits, the people who are interpreting the events for the American people, to play down the importance of these events, to make it seem like we shouldn't get too excited, that we should be worried about the Muslim Brotherhood. You know, it's kind of a boogeyman that is being used to make it seem like maybe democracy is not such a good thing in this particular case. And you know, you hear a lot about the United States walking a fine line, a tightrope, a delicate balancing act in regards to democracy. And I think that if the media, the U.S. media, were doing their actual job, they would be pointing out that the United States is not in favor of democracy. You can't be in favor of democracy as long as it gives you the results that you want. That's like being for free speech if you agree with what the person is saying.
Well, let me frame the points that you're making in a different way to Charlie Wolf, who's been disagreeing with the points you've been making. But let me put it to you this way. Do you think that the coverage of American networks would be different if the internet, cell phone access had been cut off in a Western capital?
I'm not sure. I think that it played just as importantly from what I saw in U.S. coverage. Excuse me. I think where Mr. Norekas is wrong is again, he's almost trying to present a utopia. The United States has always stood for democracy. I don't think this president has done as well a job. And you know, I think the professor was right when he talked about how he handled the vote in Iran. It sort of stifled some of his moral authority when he did not back the democracy movement in Iran after the elections there, which clearly were stolen by Mr. Ahmadinejad and the mullahs.
But you wouldn't see the same kind of fear-mongering, don't you think, if we were talking about Paris?
Well, no, but the problem isn't that we don't think that Arabs deserve democracy. The fear is that they're so close to democracy. Democracy is a fragile thing that can be easily stolen. And the Muslim Brotherhood, the reason they are taking up so much airtime is it is very much a true fear that these people, though they're lying low, will happily wade in and exploit the situation. As happened again, and the professor knows more about Iran, obviously, than I do, but I'm sure he would say, as I remember, that too was not an Islamic revolution in the beginning. It was just like happening in Egypt now, back in '79. It was a secular sort of a revolution that was then exploited by Khomeini and that law is on the size
Wait a minute,
Iran.
Charlie Wolf. In the New York Times today, the Muslim Brotherhood representative on the committee that's working towards a transition, trying to unify the opposition, is quoted as saying that the group wants a civil state, not a religious one. We are standing for a real democracy, he said. This is Mohammed El-Beltaghi, with general freedom and a real sense of social justice. Can they be taking it at their word, Professor Benouazizi?
It's very interesting that yesterday, in the Friday prayers, the supreme leader in Iran tried to portray this movement in Egypt as an Islamic